So I have also a climate topic, which is a cautionary tale of climate impact claims. And so there has been a study by some researchers in New Zealand who found that island nations in the Pacific, like Tuvalu, are not necessarily feeling a big climate impact in the future on their tiny islands in the sense of drowning in rising sea levels. And so they simulated a small scale model of an actual island from the island nation of Tuvalu. And they found that this island is growing with the tide, with the increasing sea levels. And that is very interesting. Previous research from satellite imagery also found that many of these island nations have actually increased their total landmass size over the recent decades, which is surprising because we know that sea levels are rising. They are, rising since the last ice age, but in the 20th century, sea levels have risen overall, not substantially, but a little bit. So you would think that, oh yeah, if there's an island in the Pacific Ocean, you assume it's static. So the higher the sea level, the smaller the island becomes. But that's not actually true because these coral atolls actually grow upwards and move upwards with rising sea levels. And so this is not featured in the climate impact assessment so far because this is recent research, and this just goes to show much of the reports we read, and then some news outlet will pick that up and say, oh yeah, in the future we will have like millions of climate refugees from these island nations. They will just come to our coast and need help because their homes are destroyed from climate change. And this is actually not true, or it's not certain. There's a high level of uncertainty, and this has not this in the reports, and they often say something like, oh, there's medium confidence, which suggests something like a 50-50 chance of decreasing landmass in these island nations. But this means there's a high level of uncertainty. But in the media outlets, it just says, oh, there's a prediction of millions of climate refugees, right? So I'll just read a bit from the abstract of this paper, actually. Challenging outputs from existing models based on the assumption that islands are geomorphically inert results demonstrate that islands not only move laterally on reef platforms, but overwash processes provide a mechanism to build and maintain the freeboard of the island above sea level. Implications of island building are profound, as it will offset existing scenarios of dramatic increases in island flooding. So what this means in plain English is that, yeah, the other processes like sand mass and movement upwards of the island will actually offset the existing scenarios that we are presented with of dramatic island flooding. And this is not in the IPCC projections, at least not to the extent that it should be. And this to me, it indicates that we should be very careful about impacts, even more so than about predictions of temperature increase. Because remember, we are talking about, we assume if the climate models are correct, there will be a certain amount of warming in the near future from CO2 emissions and other greenhouse gases. And then on top of that, there will be certain impacts like sea level rise, right? And on top of that, then the economists come in and say, hey, this will have a giant amount of impact on our economy in the year 2050 or 2100. And as it shows here, this is just not certain. A lot of this is highly speculative, and often it's just not as we assume.
Yeah, I mean, so I think one of the lessons of the 20th century was the failure of centrally planning an economy. And although I don't think this is the most fundamental way to think about the issue, the economist Hayek pointed out that the central planners don't have the knowledge, particularly the kind of knowledge of time and place, as he called it, not knowing the details of this particular patch of land is the best one to drill on versus that patch of land, in order to actually centrally plan an economy. And so that this had to fail. And I think what's going on is one thing that's going on is that the climate catastrophists who want to like certainly do want to centrally plan the economy, certainly the energy economy. It's even broader in that they want to centrally plan the ecosystem, and they have nowhere near the knowledge and the climate, and they have nowhere near the knowledge they need to plan that. Now they would say, well, no, we're just preventing us from ruining the ecosystem. We're preventing us from impacting the climate, and that way that it will run itself. But I think part of what you're seeing in stories like this is that nature is actually very adaptive, and and just as free individuals are very adaptive. And so if you don't appreciate the complexity of these systems and then the adaptive nature of these systems, including the adaptive nature of human beings, you're just like destined to create a train wreck if you try to control it.